Thank you. So, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Ronnie. I appreciate that. Wish my mom would have been here. Should have believed most of it. But no, it's good to be with you this morning. For whatever reason, I don't know what that is, but there's a little more pep in your step and a little happier meeting this morning than it was in previous opportunities when we've been together over the last 3 or 4 years while you boys have suffered, men and women have suffered through what's been going on. My team came up with a quote. Some of you have heard it. It says, never give in, never give in, never, never, never give in. We stood alone a year ago, and to many it seemed that our account was closed and that we were finished. A very different mood today. That was Winston Churchill at a commencement address in 1941. But it wasn't a year ago, it was April of last year when we thought we'd been handed an ugly defeat. And I was pretty blunt in my comments about why that happened and who it hurt. And so I've been able to use that across this time frame to remind people about what happened to us at that point in time, the stunning disappointment associated with what didn't happen in the omnibus last year, and we thought it would. It should have happened. You have had to endure another year almost of the consequences. But yesterday morning, I was standing at the earlier in the week, my team pointed out to me, said, "Look, boss, wouldn't it be pretty cool if we get this deal done this week and that you get to go to the Cotton Council meeting on Saturday?" And I was like, well, yeah, that would be kind of cool. So not wanting to jinx anything, so I really didn't think about too much of it because I just didn't want to jinx and all that kind of stuff. And yesterday morning about 5 o'clock when we were voting, I was standing against the rail in the back watching that counter click. We put the number up, unlike the Senate, who's got a tradition unhindered by progress where they actually roll call everything among their traditions. We put it up on an electronic scoreboard. It's like Friday night. You just watch the score go up. And I stood there at the back, my heart, my throat, thinking, don't screw this up. Don't screw this up. I've got a lot of folks that got a lot of stuff riding on this, not just your cotton policy and the dairy policy and the disaster relief that we get for the rest of Texas, but a lot of stuff going on. And I was just, don't count your chickens before your eggs hatch, all those kind of, stuff that goes wrong. And then it clicked to 218, and I physically felt it inside when it got to 218 and the board, and we're done. It was headed to the president's desk shortly, and so I was really pleased with it. Excuse me. As with all of these efforts, you're bragging on me and all that kind of good stuff, and thank you very much. But the truth of the matter is, you and I both know that this didn't happen by the work of one person. I had great help with my colleagues in the House, Paul Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, Patrick McHenry, Robert Adeholt, the terrific chairman of Ag Approach Subcommittee, Rodney Frulinghauser, the chairman of Approach Committee, who had to hold this on our behalf, and he was taking a lot of heat. And, of course, our guy from Lubbock, Jody Arrington, did a terrific job of just keeping it out there. Apparently, Jody likes to talk, and don't tell him I said that. But, no, he's been a terrific partner on this effort. Over in the Senate, we had I don't think John's coming by video or something. He screwed that up. He should ought to come. John can't overstate what John did for us in the Senate to make sure it got in there and stayed in there and stayed in there. That it wasn't just one of these casual things where John just, oh, yeah. He got the policy, he understood it, and he knew exactly why it was important. And if you get a chance to talk to John, be sure and thank him. But Pat Roberts and Thad Cochran, John Bozeman from Arkansas, John Hoeven, and Jerry Moran, all of those senators played an integral part in holding this, unlike in April last year. So don't understate what those guys could do and do for us, given what happened to us in April. You've seen the results when that doesn't work. We've also got terrific allies throughout this entire room. I look around, I see a lot of you who spend as much time almost in D.C. as I do. I thought you grew cotton for a living, but a lot of you like to hang out in D.C., working the halls, doing all the stuff that you've got to do, building those relationships across the aisle, both sides of the aisle, both sides of the building, going at it, hammer and tog. Your legislative efforts paid off in spades yesterday morning when we were able to get the president's signature on this bill. So can't overstate what Ronnie, your team does, and throughout the entire lobbying deal. Reese Langley particularly leads that effort in D.C. I wish he weren't in the room, but the real credit for what I get credit for, sitting on the front row over here, got Matt Scherz, our staff director, Bart Fisher, the chief economist, the deputy staff director, and Trevor White, the brainiacs who put this policy together, who came up with this idea after the Phoenix of, yep. So it was their idea. They came up with better policy than cottonseed oil, made it work, a new phrase, seed, cotton, that we've all now become loving, that we now love. It rolls off our tongue like it's been there forever. Those are the three guys who came up with that policy and made it work the whole inside baseball, behind the scenes, working with staff, working with leadership staff, working with the leadership, the speaker's staff, their colleagues over in the Senate, just day in and day out, making sure this stayed in this round of, this is our opportunity. Whether it was we put it in the House bill, on the disaster bill, they held it in there. So like I said, they really, really deserve all the credit. So I was, yesterday morning, God, it seemed like a long time ago, yesterday morning, 5 o'clock, they were at the back of the room in the chambers. They don't come to the chambers all that often, but they were there for some reason on this vote. And I said, "Are you guys coming to Fort Worth?" And they said, "Well, I don't know, boss." I said, "Well, there's going to be a lot of hugging and smooching going on. You need to get your fair share of it. So you need to get to Fort Worth and catch up on some of that hugging and smooching." So, but great day for all of us in this regard. We're going to now use this as a launching pad. I think personally that it will make the efforts on the 2018 Farm Bill just a little bit less difficult. We're in a better bargaining position vis-a-vis the rest of the things that are going on. You get the help a crop year earlier than you would have. I had assured you you were going to get it in the Farm Bill, but that would have been the 19 crop year. This gets you a year earlier on that, and so it does lay the groundwork. We don't talk about it much here, but there's a terrific dairy effort went on to make sure that the dairymen out there across Texas and across this country have also got improvements to their safety net also. That will and also make the efforts just a little bit less difficult. We're ready to go. This was the last kind of uncertainty that I had in terms of what the committee needed to do. We've done 110 hearings. We did 21 on SNAP alone. We did 6 listening sessions from across the country. So our committee has done the legislative back work, the oversight work, everything we needed to do to get ready to go. So all the things within my control were there. When we get back after the President's Day week, at some point in time, if I can get floor time, and quite more importantly, of course, if I can convince leadership I've got 218 votes, then we're pretty much ready to pull the trigger. Now, there are lots of things outside my control. We'll take up an immigration bill soon. We've got the actual appropriations bills for the 18 spending plan to actually get those done before March 23rd. So there could be other things way outside my control, but the stuff that I can control, we're ready to go. And now that we've got this certainty behind us on seed cotton and the dairy program, we'll fine tune it and be ready to rock and roll. Pat Roberts on the Senate side has talked about going on a very similar time frame. If we can both get our bills done before the end of March, which would be the plan, then that would give us about 6 months to work out the differences, negotiate the conference report, and get this thing to the President's desk in advance of our September 30th drop-dead date. So we're gonna make that happen. The risks now are partisan politics that might rear its ugly head with respect to SNAP and the hostile floor amendments. We're going to have to go to fight them off again, whether it's crop insurance or sugar, whatever it might be. There will be poison pill attempts on the floor to go after our farm bill, and that's going to happen no matter what. I can't stop it. One thing I am going to do, though, is talk to the Rules Committee and try to prevent poison pill amendments getting to the floor, coming from men and women who will not vote for the bill no matter what. Mechanically, if I'm a hard no on the bill, I should not be able to make it worse and then still vote no. If I'm a no, I'm a no. Now, if I've got an amendment that passed and that would get me to a yes, okay, well, let's have that conversation. So they've done this on some of the other tough bills to pass, and I'm going to try to hope to talk to our rules guys and say, look, don't give that amendment because it's a poison pill that kills the bill, and I'll never get that guy's vote anyway. So don't do that to it. Now, That won't prevent all of those amendments from coming to the floor, but we're going to have to fight those off. But we're in a much better position to make that happen than we would not otherwise have been. Sonny Perdue has been a terrific help. Many of you know Sonny already. I just met him a year ago, and I could not be more impressed. He showed up at the this past week to the committee, did a terrific job. You know, you got to love this guy. I mean, he's compassionate, he's caring, blunt when he needs to be, a guy you can deal with, a guy you can work with, and he wants to get to a yes. And he's just done a great job. You know, he made the right comment that Congress writes this farm bill. We'll help him where we can, and then we've got to implement it. And so he's helping me write it. I'm going to help him implement it. I don't think there'll be a lot of changes. This won't be the revolutionary change that you experienced in 2014. It'll be more evolutionary, and so won't be quite the problem at our FSA offices that the 14 Farm Bill was. And so we'll be making that happen as well. The budget from the president will come out on the 12th. My guess is that Mick Mulvaney will have not listened to the president one more time, and we'll have to argue as to why those cuts to farm programs don't make any sense, but certainly prepared to do that and make that happen. We had another pretty good little victory with the tax bill. Many of you are going to be affected by that. If I could get you making money, then you'd be even more excited about the tax bill. And with a little 199A issue there that we've got to get fixed, talking with Kevin Brady, he understands exactly why that needs to get fixed, and it needs to get fixed now because we've got folks out there that are trying to change their business model to be able to compete against co-ops the way that they, you know, if you're a private grain guy and your competition's got a 20% haircut on the price, that's just a little tough competition. So changing business models as a result of a tax policy, particularly unintended consequence tax policy like this one, doesn't make any sense, and so we've got to get that fixed. I talked to Kevin yesterday about it, and he's clearly aware of the day-to-day impacts that are happening right now. People are selling right now. They're trying to change business models, and forward contracting screwed up. So anyway, we got to get that fixed sooner rather than later to make that happen. But the president's making good on his promises about WOTUS and the Clean Power Plan and all those kind of regulatory things that are going on. You'll soon begin to feel a little different attitude from regulators that gets back to a more partnership kind of a feel as opposed to an automatic adversary. And I think that's going to be good for us as well as we move forward. Trade is on the front of everybody's mind, whether it's NAFTA getting redone, and our president's going to make that happen. And I took a group to Canada in September just to try to convince our Canadian partners that our guy was really serious and that he might just very well threaten to pull out, that they needed to get to the table. They don't need anything. They don't want a lot of stuff, and so they weren't really thinking all that seriously about it. And then, of course, our president began to negotiate hard the way he typically does, and so I think we now got him at the table. But Secretary Perdue said we probably he hopes to have something done by the end of the year. Obviously, sooner than later is better on that. Then when we've got a president who's going to defend us against unfair trade practices coming from other countries, when that happens, that they retaliate. I don't know if any of you guys grow sorghum as well, but obviously China is rattling sabers on sorghum. We don't know exactly what that's going to do yet. I don't think they've gotten the paperwork. But if you look at the run-up in exports to China on sorghum over the last 3 years, the sorghum guys have done a great job of creating that market, and the Chinese knew it. And so that's why they retaliated there against the acts that we took on aluminum and steel. So when you go after somebody, then just like with cotton did in Turkey, the other side gets to retaliate, and so you want to be defended, but at the same token, none of you want to be in the sorghum circumstances where you get picked out, or cotton was, against Turkey. So just know that that's happening. Then we've got a guy who's going to defend our trade deals, and it's a full contact sport. Bob Goodlight and I are working on an immigration bill. I'm working with him to try to get the ag portion, the ag worker portion, in one that will actually physically work, mechanically work. And he's been a great partner in that regard. He wants to marry it up with E-Verify, which, if you believe that it's in America's best interest, that if you're in this country on a legal status, you can work. If you're here illegally, you should not be able to work. Well, that's E-Verify. And so, but before we get there, we've got to come to grips and transition whatever ag workers out there who are not on that legal status into that legal status, because we don't want to cut our nose off to spite our face. But an implementation process on this deal that screws up, the dairies and slaughterhouses and row crop folks that are working every single day to provide us with the food that we've got. So stay tuned on that. Those are kind of linked together. And the overall DACA immigration issue that's going to be moving over the next several weeks, Goodlatte really believes that he needs to keep those together. The Ag Worker Program, E-Verify, attached to the broader immigration reform that's moving, because, and I agree with him on this immigration round, it will be difficult and hard, and if we don't get the Ag Worker Program E-Verify then I don't know that the body will be willing to take it up again anytime soon, and we need this fixed. And so I'm working with Goodlatte to try to make sure that it does actually just work as opposed to getting us where we want to get there. So, and then an infrastructure bill that we'll start debating. Every chance I get to talk to anybody about it, it's about rural broadband for America. There's some roads and bridges and those kind of things. I got that, but the big ticket item for me would be rural broadband and getting that continued rollout across this country to allow us not only to use it the way it's currently being used, but if you think about it, we send kids off to school, off to the big campuses where they've got it, and we've got anybody under 21 has never not known a cell phone. They're not going to come home if they don't have access to the same kind of stuff they had when they go to the big city. So if we're going to compete in that regard, we've got to get that done. And then, of course, just the business aspects of it as we continue to develop better monitoring and better, harvest yields, data, getting it quicker, getting that to the market, getting all that stuff done. You got to have the real broadband to make that work. So, Ronnie, I really appreciate being here this morning. I probably talked longer than I should have. I guess we got time for a couple of questions or no, and then I've got some closing remarks. So, again, thank you all for letting me be with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Chairman Conaway, thank you very much for that message. The chairman has agreed to take questions. There are 2 council staff with microphones. So I ask industry leaders who would like to ask the congressman a question to stand and wait until staff brings them the microphone. Before opening the floor to questions, Mr. Chairman, I want to say a huge thank you for your commitment to agriculture, and especially your commitment to the cotton industry. The tireless efforts of you and your staff on behalf do not go unrecognized. Especially recognize the significance of your support and effectiveness in a key vote yesterday to add cotton policy to Title I of the Farm Bill beginning with this year. How many times I've said we just want to be back in Title I. We got there. This is a tremendous achievement in a very difficult political environment. We simply could not ask for a chairman who understands the needs of our industry any better. I'm sure being a congressman sometimes is a thankless job, but we want you to know how thankful this industry is for you and what your efforts are producing. There are 2 council staff with microphones, so I ask industry leaders to ask the congressman a question.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to agriculture. Thank you for your commitment to cotton and trying to get this farm bill done on time. Special friend to all of us, special friend to this industry. A lot of hard work ahead. I think after yesterday, a lot of us feel like we kind of got the wind at our back, but we all know that navigating the process to the final farm bill is going to be difficult. You alluded into your remarks about the possibility of some outside groups might try to have some influence to see that this farm bill process fails. Can you detail those groups and what you think their influence might be toward the final passage of the farm bill?
I suspect, thanks, Woody, crop insurance will be the big target, would be my guess. We've done it before. We had to fight them off. We barely beat them. It's like a lot of things. We have to beat them every single time. They just have to get it right once. And so in the last farm bill, they got a lot closer than I would have liked. And so we're going to have to beat those off. Unlike 14, obviously, the 18 Farm Bill is being written against a much different economic backdrop in production agriculture. There were folks who were thinking they were asking a legitimate question in 2014 about, why do you need a safety net? Why do you need all this? Because farmers are doing great. They're never going to see another poor day and all this kind of good stuff. Well, nobody would make that argument today. But it's going to be crop insurance would be probably the biggest issue. I got a little grumpy with our colleagues at CBO about coming out with their unsolicited report on crop insurance. I had a good, firm conversation with the guy that did that, and as to why, because I assumed that his role was to call balls and strikes on policies that I came up with, and then he thinks he's coming up with policies of his own or whatever. And so, I'm sure that will get used against us. So there'll be other, misguided studies or whatever that'll be used. But that's where you're going to have to unleash your key person contacts. The production agriculture writ large does a really terrific job of staying after your members. And whether the sugar lobby or the crop insurance folks, all of them know that they've got to freshen up those relationships over the next couple of months. Or now 6 weeks or so, if in fact I can get it done before the end of March, that we'll have to fight that off. But crop insurance is the one I expect to be the one that's be the most trouble. SNAP, let me give you a couple of comments real quick on SNAP. That's typically one that's pretty controversial. I mentioned we did 21 hearings. For 3 years now, we've been looking at a program that's really important to our country. Jackie Walorski led that effort for the first 2 years. Glenn Thompson has now led it for the last year. But we've only focused on policy. We've not focused on money one time. And so unlike previous efforts to deal with SNAP, where they came up with a number that they had to get to, a savings number, and then you got to figure a policy that goes there, we're going the other direction. And so for 3 years, I've been thinking about what's the best policy. Well, we did that policy. The question was, could we afford it? We've got those scores coming back to us. We're not quite all done, but looks like we can actually afford the good policy that we're talking about. And so when we have our conversations with Rosa DeLauro and Jim McGovern and the others, it won't be about money. It'll be about, is this the best policy? Is it really good policy to incentivize folks to go back to work, to get them back on their own feet and back up that ladder of success so they're taking care of their families? Isn't that a better policy? As opposed to, well, you just want to cut X amount out. We had a terrific story from a young woman, I think it was California, listening session. She stood at a microphone and said, I'm the reason that SNAP ought to stay in place. She said, I was 18 years old, a single mom of a 3-year-old, do that math, and I didn't like my future, and I wanted to go to college. And a combination of SNAP and some other programs that were there and her hard work, I got a college degree, I became a teacher, I've gotten a master's. I'm now in administration. And for my daughter and I, public assistance is what we do for other people. That's a story that we ought to embrace. That's the success that we want SNAP to drive, along with the other pieces of the pie. But SNAP is a big piece of that. I think most Americans would support outcomes like that. Now, elderly, mentally and physically disabled, children, we're not talking about them. We're not going to kick them off the program. But if, as Paul said, if you don't work, you don't eat. Well, folks who are capable of working, they need to work. And we're coming into an era now where jobs are being created. Those of you that kind of whistle through West Texas from time to time, you see now hiring signs everywhere. And that's popping up in other regions of the United States as well. So we need workers and folks need to go back to work. Those two are coming together at the right time for us to be able to affect really good SNAP policy. So I don't think it'll be SNAP necessarily, but in all likelihood it'll be crop insurance.
Mr. Chairman, first and foremost, we'd like to give you our most sincere thanks from a grateful industry for your undying support for the cotton industry. We are indebted to your service, and thank you for your support. But you alluded to NAFTA in your remarks, and as a producer, NAFTA is important to me, but also it's very important to our textile industry. And you mentioned our neighbors to the north and the Canadians. Mexico is our 5th largest customer for raw cotton, and the 2nd largest customer for textiles and industries, textiles. Anyway, we, I lost my train of thought here. But anyway, how do you see the negotiations going, and do you have any insight as to when they might be completed? We feel like there could be modernizations, but first we don't want to do any harm to either party involved.
Well, thanks. I don't have any direct, that's the executive branch responsibility to negotiate NAFTA. We keep telling them, don't screw it up. Production agriculture has got to have trade. Don't trade agricultural advantages for something else. And one of the things that written large the industry did well under TPP negotiations was you stayed at Michael Froman's elbow the entire time. And as a result of that, TPP looked pretty darn good for production agriculture. Maybe tobacco and rice, not so much, but everything else was there. Well, you got to keep it up. And you got to stay at the table and keep your folks there all the time. And as best I can tell, that's currently happening. But timing-wise, the secretary was a little bit, he's one step closer to the negotiations than I am. He said maybe by the end of the year. We've sent folks to observe some of the rounds in the negotiations. And Lighthizer he's negotiating hard. And he's got a boss that's backing his play. And so, but again, there's so many moving parts in negotiations like that. You don't know, where's the bluff and what's not and all this kind of stuff as you look at it from the outside in. But I know we've got competent, really good people doing it. And President Trump is a negotiator. He does know how to do that. So I think they all understand the importance of getting it done sooner rather than later. The uncertainty created in the market by these deals not being there is hurtful, and they know that. Lighthizer knows that exactly. And so, but every chance I get to visit with him, it's get it done, get it done. Don't trade ag for something else. All right, well, Ron, let me finish off real quick if I could. Give me one more minute or so. Yeah. To take your cotton hats off and publicity hats off and all that kind of stuff, let me just talk to you real quick about something that God put on my heart several years ago, and that's this idea that our country is at a crossroads. We are at a point where we're desperately deteriorating into a point where I'm not sure we can sustain self-governance a great deal longer. John Adams wrote that only a moral and religious people can self-govern, and that our form of governance is unsuitable for anybody else. Some of you have heard me talk about this before, but it has not gotten any better since I talked to you the last time. The attacks on Christianity, the attacks on our values that built and sustained this country are growing every single day. I take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Many of you took that oath when I did. We took them to join the military. I take it as a member of Congress. I want to challenge you to think about those of you that have taken that oath and those of you that would take that oath given the chance. Just what would you do to protect and defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic? The men and women in uniform have got their lives on the line today and their bodies to back up their oath. And so I'm going to ask you to what you're going to challenge. As our moral fabric tears and rips and shreds, we've got to be about the hard business of reclaiming it, of sewing it back together, of plugging back in, to facing up to those forces that are growing stronger every day that says, those old values are passé, they're no longer appropriate, we know what's better for us. Truth is irrelevant except what I believe is truth. There are no standards about which to measure things. As those attacks come and grow, each of us has to stand up and say, no, there are values that are tried and true and forever, and they're based in a code. For me, they're based in the Judeo-Christian model. Jesus Christ is my personal Savior, and I try to live His tenets every day, and some days I'm better at it than others. But you have to leave a code as well. There is right and wrong. There are black and white issues, and we now have to begin to confront that issue, because if we don't, then we will continue to lose the moral high ground. We'll continue to slide into this awful abyss of conduct that you see going on every single day in our country. And that will result in the loss of self-governance, the loss of this republic moving forward. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to think, will you stand up and challenge folks? Will you put something on the line to defend this Constitution and this way of life? Will you risk ridicule? Will you risk being ostracized? Will you risk being called all kinds of names because you said, no, these Judeo-Christian values on which this country was based and was sustained for 230 years are still tried and true, and they're still the core on which we must continue to hold ourselves accountable. Can you or will you be that person? Will you join me in trying to push back against that and try to preserve this republic for future generations? 230 good years that it's been kept for us. When it was finished in Philadelphia in 1787, Benjamin Franklin was confronted by a woman that after he finished it, and she said, "Good doctor, what have you given us, monarchy or republic?" He looked at her and said, "Madam, a republic, if you can keep it." That's us. We are the keepers of the republic. Only republics can be kept by free people and free self-governing people, and only moral and religious people can self-govern and be free and defend this republic. It's a republic, men and women, if we can keep it. God bless each one of you. God bless Texas. God bless the United States of America. Thank you all very much. Good to be with you. Thank you all.
Chairman Conaway, please accept our sincere thanks for all you do for agriculture and our industry. Again, we greatly appreciate you taking time away from your busy schedule to be with us today and for your outstanding presentation. And your staff, I'm just going to, I gotta say something about your staff. I mean, and Bart and Matt, I know, gotten to know pretty good, but it's all of us in here that have had to go to Washington and fight for what we do. Those two guys right there, they got it done with his leadership.
Right up. Servant. Now, let me, again, thank those guys. I was going to thank them one more time, and it slipped my mind, but they're doing terrific work. I'm able to do what I do in D.C. and around the world because I've got terrific people back home keeping fires alive back there. And I got two of them over here in the corner. Evan Thomas is my district director. He circuit rides all 29 counties that I get to personally represent and does a terrific job of making sure people remember I still represent them. And then Jenna Sands is recent addition to the staff. She's doing the social media stuff. She's trying to drag me, kicking and screaming, into the 21st century of social media. So I've got great folks back home as well. So, but again, thank you, my staff.